How concerned are you about the speakership battle delaying support to Israel?
Look, it's nuts. My Republican colleagues are in complete disarray. It is chaos. And the basic fact is they cannot govern. My colleagues and I on the Democratic side have been crystal clear. We are extending a hand in friendship, in the spirit of bipartisanship. We need 5 sensible Republicans to join us. We'll work out some bipartisan arrangement. This is a moment where we need to put country over party, and I am seeing the worst kind of extremism and dysfunction and chaos on the right, and it has paralyzed the House in a moment when our friends in Israel need us to act, where we are still running up against the clock of aid to Ukraine, and where we need to take action on humanitarian relief as well. There's so much we've got to do, and that's all without even looking inward at our own problems around funding the government that the Republicans have taken us to the brink now again as funding runs out later in November.
I want to touch on the humanitarian crisis unfolding in a minute, but Congressman, you're a veteran of the Iraq War. That was a conflict in which the U.S. military was often operating in close quarters with civilians. The Israeli military will face a similar situation in Gaza. What should they be doing to avoid unnecessary deaths?
It is paramount. I mean, this type of fighting and this type of conflict is horrible, and it's difficult, and there will be suffering. And of course, Israelis have experienced this, folks in Gaza have experienced this. A reality of war is that people will suffer, especially when you have an adversary like Hamas who is willing to use people, civilians, as human shields to embed themselves in the civilian population. It requires restraint in a fight that you've got to win, and that's not an easy task. And certainly I know the administration has been sharing that point of view with our Israeli friends as they pursue Hamas, which they must, to protect civilian life as they must and will. And it really is not an easy thing. It is a horrible part of war, and is a reason why we ought to avoid fighting where we can, and when we have to, do it with some discretion.
What should the role of the U.S. military be in this conflict?
Look, I think our role is support, deterrence, containing the fight. I don't think there's a role to have American boots on the ground. You saw the carrier strike group move into the Eastern Mediterranean. That is a significant show of force, I hope and think, to deter with an idea toward containing this. We don't want to see fighting spread elsewhere in the region. And if need be, I think having a carrier strike group there provides resources if we have to evacuate folks, if things get worse, if we have to do those kinds of operations, which I hope we won't. I hope we're able to rely on those charter flights and otherwise to get Americans out. But I think our role is there to support and assist our Israeli friends. That security assistance has been a longstanding tradition in this country, and I know will continue.
Have you heard anything more about the Rafah crossing and why it appears that the window that appeared that the crossing would be open so that U.S. citizens could leave Gaza and go through Egypt, that didn't appear to open?
I don't have any more current info. Certainly, we need a way to get Americans out of Gaza. That Rafah crossing is the obvious way, and the agreement was a good sign, although it seems like it didn't pan out as expected. So we'll be digging in to find out why and how we can get Americans out. That is a key priority for us. And back to your question on the presence, the carrier strike group and American forces, it is important that they're there if we have to have other ways to get Americans out.
Congressman, many of your fellow Progressive Caucus members have signed a letter urging humanitarian relief for Israelis and Palestinians. We have heard just the dire situation from our Kelly Kobiea that there's no fuel, electricity, even drinkable water. What needs to happen?
Okay, a humanitarian crisis is unfolding. This is not something unexpected when you have war breakout. And I think our role as leaders in the world is to support and make sure that folks aren't suffering. That aid is important, Israeli and Palestinian alike. And I think it will be further complicated by the depravity of Hamas, who is so willing to embed themselves in the civilian population, to inflict suffering on the Palestinian people toward their aim of eradicating the state of Israel. And it's not an easy answer for us, but we have to be working toward protecting civilians and getting aid so that folks aren't suffering needlessly.